Shalom and welcome to Simchat Yisrael. Be'halot'cha is famous for being one of the most comically contradictory statements in all of the Bible. It says, "Now Moses was very humble, more humble than any man on the face of the earth." Scholars all agree that the Torah had multiple editors and redactors over the years, but according to Jewish tradition, Moses is the author of the 5 books of the Pentateuch. So if he wrote this line, he might be overstating his modesty. Before we get into the Parsha, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel below. Miriam and Aaron began to talk against Moses because of his Cushite wife, for he had married a Cushite. Has the Lord spoken only through Moses, they asked? Hasn't he also spoken through us? And the Lord heard this. These verses raise a lot of questions that we don't have answers to in the plain text. Who is this Cushite woman? Why do Miriam and Aaron have a problem with her? What does being a prophet have to do with anything? And why do we need to know that Moses is humble? Judaism teaches several different ways to read the Bible. One of those methods is called Peshat, which is a literal plain text reading of the scriptures. What you see is what you get. Another method is called Darash, which is an interpretive method using Midrash to explain difficult passages. What's strange about this story from Numbers is that the classical rabbinic commentaries basically disregard the plain meaning of the text and instead focus on the oral tradition to interpret this story. Let's look at how these two methods deal with our first question. Who is the Cushite woman? Torah tells us that Moses married Zipporah, the daughter of Yisrael, during his time of exile. But Zipporah is a Midianite, not a Cushite. Cush refers to a place in Africa, south of Egypt, that corresponds to modern-day Sudan or Ethiopia. So the Peshat reading of the text suggests that Moses must have taken a second wife from the land of Cush. But the Darash explanation says something completely different. In Midrash Tanhuma, we read that Cushite, as well as being an ethnic identity, was also commonly used as a synonym for beautiful or dark skin. The Midrash argues that in this passage, Cushite isn't referring to the ethnic identity of Moses' wife, but to her appearance. So while Zipporah may not be from Cush, she was a dark-skinned beauty, and she is the wife in question. So if we are talking about Zipporah, then our next question is, what is Miriam's problem with her? After all, Zipporah and Moses have been married for a long time at this point. It seems strange that Miriam would object to the union so long after the fact. The text never explicitly says that Miriam was upset that Moses had married his wife. We assume that due to the way the sentence is phrased, but all the text really says is that Miriam was upset on account of Moses' wife. So what is she upset about? This time there is no Peshat explanation. The text doesn't tell us explicitly what her issue is. So we have to depend on Drash for clarification. The Midrash tells us that Miriam was upset with Moses because he was in the process of separating from his wife. Why would he do such a thing? All through the book of Leviticus, we see that in order to be in the presence of God, one has to be completely ritually pure. The priests, when serving in the temple, must be washed and cleansed and ready for service when they enter. But they only need to be pure when it's their time to serve. Moses, on the other hand, needed to be ready to receive the presence of God at all times. Moses needed to be pure 24/7. And one of the things that makes someone ritually impure is marital relations. So Moses needed to leave his wife because he couldn't fulfill both his duties to her and to God. Of course, this would anger his sister Miriam. Talmud Sota tells us a story that before Moses was born, Miriam received a vision from God. God showed her that her mother would give birth to a boy who would grow up to be a great leader among the Israelites and who would be the one to lead them to freedom. But the problem was that Pharaoh had just issued his decree ordering the deaths of every Israelite boy. Miriam's father, Amram, had decided that it was better to not have children in such a world and had separated from his wife Jochebed. Amram was a leader among his people, and soon all the Israelite men had followed suit and left their wives. Miriam storms up to her father and says, "You are even worse than Pharaoh. He has only ordered the death of our boys, but you condemn all Jewish children, boys and girls, to never be born." Amram realized she was right and went back to his wife, and soon they conceived Moses, fulfilling Miriam's prophecy. This is why Miriam was so upset. She was particularly sensitive to what she saw as a mistake on Moses' part. Celibacy is not the Jewish way. This was a battle that Miriam had fought and won years earlier. The way she saw it, Moses owed his very existence to Miriam's wisdom, so he had better take it now. She gets together with Aaron and they confront Moses. She tells him, "What makes you think you need to leave your wife? Do you think you're the only prophet in this camp? Hasn't God spoken through Aaron and me? We're prophets too, and we can still have normal family lives. What makes you think that you need to be so much more holy than us? And Moses doesn't respond. Not because he is ashamed by what she said, but because he is a man of great humility and doesn't want to elevate himself above his siblings. But then God himself comes to Moses' defense. He tells Miriam and Aaron that this time they are wrong. Yes, he has spoken through both of them, but they don't share the special connection with God that Moses has. Moses is a prophet unlike any that had come before or who would come after. He alone among the prophets speaks to God face to face. He alone had seen the image of God. He stands as more than just a prophet, and God had called him to walk a holier and more lonely road. Moses was different. He had to live in a constant state of separateness, a constant state of preparedness. For Moses, holiness wasn't just an occasional event. It was his state of being. We don't have a priesthood or a temple anymore. So we don't have the same concerns about ritual impurity that Moses did. But the Bible teaches us that we are a kingdom of priests and that our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit. God's presence lives in us and is always with us. Our bodies need to be living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. Holiness isn't just an occasional event for us either. It's our state of being. How do we live up to our calling of holiness while still being part of this world? When Messiah prayed for his disciples, he didn't ask for them to be removed from the world. The world needs us too much. So how do we navigate what even Moses struggled with? Our only hope is to look to the example of Messiah Yeshua. No one understood the struggle of walking between holiness and worldliness better than Yeshua. The book of Matthew tells a story of Yeshua having dinner at a friend's house. Hearing that Yeshua was there, many sinners and tax collectors came to eat with him and learn from him. Rather than leave the house so that he wouldn't become defiled by their sin, Yeshua stayed and he ate with the sinners. The Pharisees saw this and they asked Yeshua's disciples why their master was eating with sinners. And Yeshua heard this and he said, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." Yeshua has taught us that our job is not to hide ourselves from the world to protect our holiness, but to live out our holiness in the world and make the world a holier place. The lesson of Messiah Yeshua is more relevant than ever today. For months now, our country has been in quarantine. We've kept ourselves separate from the world to protect us from becoming unclean. But in recent weeks, terrible injustices and deeply ingrained systematic evils have come to light. And thousands of people all around the world who have stayed in their homes and stayed safe have made the difficult decision to leave the safety and cleanliness of their homes to stand up for what matters most. They are risking infection, sometimes even death. But Yeshua taught us that we can't change the world without being in it. And while those of us who do choose to take to the streets to fight injustices are at a higher risk of being infected, we do it so that our children have a chance to live in a better world than ours. We take a chance when we live in the world. It's a dirty, scary, unclean place. But when we have the Spirit of God in us, we don't have to be afraid of becoming corrupted by it. God lives in us, and Yeshua teaches us that our presence in the world does not make us unclean. It makes the world holy. Shalom, and thanks for watching. If you like this video, please make sure to subscribe for more. And don't forget to visit simchatyisrael.org to learn more.